Welcome to another interview episode of After the Abuse. Today we'll be talking with Harold Glen Hall. Let's get right into that. Harold will be joining us from Washington State via FaceTime. Harold, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Please tell us a little about your life now.
Well, now I'm a 63-year-old man, retired from the Army after 30 years, and I work for a security company as their patrol manager. Kind of looking forward to retirement in a few more years.
Can you tell us a little about what you had to endure as a child?
It started, my sister and I were born 2 months premature, and my sister died within 3 hours of birth, depending on who you want to listen to. And my mother immediately rejected me as her child, neglected me from the time I was out of the hospital. I was in an incubator for 3 to 4 months, fighting for my life. So my mother wouldn't do anything with me, so my aunts would have to come over and take turns at taking care of me. So the neglect and the emotional abuse and some physical abuse started as early as I remember as a toddler, and escalated into beatings and physical abuse, isolation from the family. I was never allowed to be around my brothers or eat with the family. My place was in a corner or locked in a closet if she didn't want to put up with me. So I never got to do the things that my brothers did, like watch TV, desserts, sweets, sodas, or anything like that. As I got older, my father went into prison when I was around 3 years old. And my father was in prison. My mother started choking and punching on me and that kind of thing. My father came out of prison around 4.5, and then he left my mother when I was 5. So once my father left, the physical abuse escalated even worse. My earliest memories of her pinching, twisting my body parts. She choked me until I passed out. And then once there was no other person in the house, my father, then she started making me sleep outside. And almost every house that we lived in, I was either on a front porch, screened-in porch, or I was in a wood shed, or I was in a dirt cellar under the house. So pretty much she just mentally and physically abused me every day until I was 11 years old. And then when I was 11, she allowed some neighbor guys next door to sexually abuse me. And then they, of course, most people have seen her behavior around me. So other kids did the same thing. Her friends taunted and teased me and that kind of thing throughout my life. And so then my siblings started doing the same thing. She would make me sit in the corner away from the family, or if we were out somewhere, I was on the floorboard of the car or in the trunk of the car. I was not allowed to see like the scenery as we're traveling, that kind of thing. Most of it was just physical and mental abuse and neglect throughout my childhood. Sexual abuse started. When I say sexual abuse, she would twist me and pinch me and threaten to cut my, as she said then, my boy parts off, and make me a girl, so she could have her little girl. She made it clear early on that she hated me and she wanted nothing to do with me, and she felt that she told me as a little boy that I had killed my sister at birth, and that of course I'm a little kid, I don't know any different, but that I starved my sister so I could live, and so that's why she died whenever at birth. And of course, as I got older, I realized that we were born 3.5 months premature, and 3 months premature, and she was at 1 pound and I was at 1.5 pounds. So I was fortunate myself to even live, and back in 1954.
So what was it that prompted you to start your healing journey?
The catalyst was, I'm 18 years old, I'm living in my car, I have no place to go. I'd already known after I came out of the boys' home, which is also part of the abuse story, that the catalyst is I was in the boys' home, And here I am, a 12-year-old kid, and I'm like, never had any new clothes in my life. Here they give me new clothes and stuff, and I'm like, wow, I'm finally someplace where I can eat. Because if I was lucky, I'd get a scrap of food a day, or I'd have to go out and steal it out of garbage cans or whatever, or somebody's kindness, because there's a lot of people that helped me as a little boy. And so when I went to the boys' home, I was physically and sexually abused there. So when I came out of the boys' home at 16 years old, I was an angry kid. I had no will to live. I didn't care if I lived. I put myself in a lot of danger. At 17, in a car, on the street, that life wasn't really worth living. And, I'd been abused from the time I was born until I was 16 years old. Escalated from physical and neglect to sexual abuse and rape since I was 11. And it was like, okay, I had no will to live. Joined the Army because I wanted to go to Vietnam and die. It was 1972. The Vietnam War was in full swing. So I said, well, I'm going to go in the military. That's it. I'll just end my life by combat. But I never went to combat. They never sent me. The catalyst that motivated me to change and fight it was a guy by the name of Sergeant Polk, Richard Polk. Took me under his wing. He says, life is better than what you know, and you need to get rid of all this anger and stuff. So he took me under his wing, and he taught me what the Army was all about, as being a leader and a soldier. That's when I really found myself and decided that I could overcome this. I could be a better person, and that's what motivated me.
Abuse survivors very often have a distorted view of self-worth. What do you do to remind yourself that you have worth?
I don't have to remind myself nowadays, because one thing about the military is it teaches you self-esteem. And if you're any type of leader, and I was fortunate enough to hit the highest rank in the Army, which is a command sergeant major, you have a lot of self-esteem. But I was able to pull my anger and my emotions from my childhood, and work through those. Didn't really have a problem with self-esteem. It was corralling the emotions behind it. That was more of the issues that I had. I ever have a problem with who I was. I had a identity problem of what I was, if that makes sense, because I had never had been able to develop as a child, or to develop in my own personality, because everything was controlled in my life by my mother. Through the emotional abuse and physical neglect, everything I did was trying to please my mother, and everything I did was try to attain a self-worth of love. So I thought I wasn't worthy of love. I thought I wasn't worthy of being anything other than somebody else's, for lack of a better word, punching bag. And because my control as a childhood, and then through the rapes and stuff, being molested, somebody was always punishing my body. So when I joined the Army, I learned to be motivated. I learned what myself were. So what I did was I built a career in the military to establish who I was, who I was as a person. So which I became a soldier. But then when I retired, and I've only told two people this. One was an interview with David, and another one is my wife. Is when I left the Army, I lost all my identity. It was like somebody had just ripped an umbilical cord away from you. I started writing my story. I started going back to speaking and being an advocate in my ministry for helping other survivors. So that gives me focus, and it allows me to know that I'm on the right path in my journey.
Okay, and how do you counter depression when things seem the most bleak?
Once again, I don't get depressed anymore, but I did. The depression was, I was the unwanted child. I was unloved and nobody wanted me. And I saw that as a child and as a teenager every day of my life. What I learned to do is focus my energy on the things that I like to do. And it's not always my work, but I was and I am a workaholic, is because I'm a perfectionist. So I have a tendency to take things to the extreme that way. But in my depression, I learned to give myself space, and I love to work on cars. I have a classical car I work on, write very well, and write in my ministry and our organization and stuff. So that's how I push that away from me.
So it's very common for abuse survivors to have to cope with substance abuse or addiction in one form or another. Is this something that you had to deal with?
Never in the form of hard drugs. My substance abuse at a very early age was cigarettes. Started smoking when I was 10 and a half, 11 years old, running in street gang in Seattle, Washington, when I ran away to get away from my mother. I never got into any substance. Then as I got older, alcohol. When I was 15 and a half, 16, I lived with my uncle, who was a full-blown alcoholic. So alcohol was readily available. Most of the time he wouldn't know even if it was missing when we did take it. Found that I could numb my anger and my pain with that. So those are two addictions that I've had in my life. The other one that I had until my mid-30s was women. And it wasn't addiction as I was addicted to the sex. It wasn't that I was addicted to the conquest. It was that I was looking for something which I didn't know until later in life, and that I was able to back off of it and look at myself, was I was looking for love. I was looking to fill a void deep inside of me that I knew as a child and as a teenager and then as a young man, that this great thing had been stolen from me and destroyed when I was a kid. I had never, to this day, my mother has never hugged me. My mother has never said, I love you, said I didn't say anything. She said the opposite, I hate you, I wish you were dead. So my addiction to women was trying to find an emotion that was truly within myself, but I didn't know it at the time. So those are the three things that were my catalysts through life, and until I didn't date or anything for several years.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say to someone who's just starting their healing journey?
The very first thing I would tell somebody that's just starting on recovery is you must give yourself time. You have to do what it takes for you to validate and acknowledge whatever it is that you went through. Because we know there's many abuse survivors in the world, and some of them were a one-time thing, some of it was a lifetime like mine. It's still the same effect on the person. Still has a psychic and mental effect on us. You as a survivor can find the answers within yourself, but you have to give yourself time to do that. And that means not thinking you're going to be healed tomorrow. Not meaning you have to work through each of the issues or events in your life, and you have to work through your emotions. And if you don't do that, then those will always come up into other events or situations in your life, and you'll be back to square one. So you really need to give yourself the time and space to know who you are, understand what happened to you. It's like my addiction with women. I realized I was going from one situation to another situation, and then I got to know who Glen is. I got to know what's driving my anger, what's driving my emotions. Why am I just running, as I like to say, running on the hamster wheel? Just running, you're not getting anywhere. That's when you need to step back and say, okay, what am I doing? What do I want? And sometimes you got to look at yourself and say, hey, what is it I'm doing wrong? Because it's very hard for any of us to say, I'm doing this wrong. This is my problem. Well, we didn't ask for it. I didn't ask to be abused all my life. I didn't ask to be raped, but it's something that was given to me, and I have to carry the emotional baggage with it. So now I have to empty that baggage to where I'm comfortable. And that's what anybody that's starting their healing process needs to do.
What would you say as a society and as individuals that we can do to protect children now?
I think that's multi-layered. First is we need to educate the public. This is an epidemic that has been shoved under the rug for so long and nobody wants to talk about it. It's happened to millions of us. I see not only the problem in the United States, I see it worldwide. We need to change the laws that I won't say protects the predator, but the predator has more rights than the victim has, whether that victim is a child or an adult. I'm 63 years old, and I'll be honest, I don't expect any justice to ever be done to my abusers or my mother. It's just not going to happen because of the time period. Then we need to have a system to where parents and kids are educated. Kids have to be allowed and taught at their level, no touch, body rules. If somebody does, then they need to know that they can take it to somebody and be believed. I remember when I was in juvenile hall, excuse me, there's a little bit of a trigger there. I'm 11 years old. I'm scared out of my mind. I'm examined, which after being sexually abused and raped is a big traumatic issue for me at the time. And I'm asking all these questions, and it was like nobody wanted to believe me until the juvenile judge had all the medical evidence in front of her. Then she believed what happened to me. A child needs to know that somebody's going to listen to them, and the laws need to be in favor of the child, even if that means that a child is removed from a home, and then later found out that it's maybe not true, but we may have saved a child. Survivors don't remember things right away. Some survivors are into their 30s, 40s, 50s before they ever remember some of the stuff that happened to them. I'm 63 years old. I can tell you right now, I have blacked out spaces in my childhood that I would like to know, but then again, maybe I don't want to know. But the thing is, the system has to change. The laws have to change at a governmental level. If I walk out my front door and murder somebody, they're going to put me in prison. If I go out and molest a child, and I may get caught, or I may not. The child needs rights. Those rights need to be protected by law.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. Thank you again, Harold. Your healing journey is an inspiration to us. That's all for this episode. Have a good evening and take care of yourself. If you're looking for resources on helping yourself or someone else who has gone through abuse, you can visit rain.org. Or, for resources specifically for men, go to oneinsix.org. If you're struggling with thoughts of suicide, please call one of the numbers in your area on the screen.